Ladies and gentlemen, fellas, welcome back to the podcast and the YouTube channel. Another $1 million up for the taking today as last week. Somebody knocked it down with the optimal lineup. I think a couple people in the industry knew that person. If you're watching this, congratulations to you. And yeah, very good week for the community in general. If you're talking about just a betting perspective, it seemed like everybody was on Webb Simpson, who comes through, closes the door, shuts out Abraham Answer at the end of that one. And really, Abraham Answer just not being able to birdie 18 ends up not forcing a playoff. So you end up getting the Webb Simpson 28-1 is where I had it for a hit. Ended up getting a huge week from the DraftKings perspective. We have been extremely hot the first 2 weeks back here. And this week we're lining up for another similar course, whereas it's a Pete Dye just like last week. It's another short course. It's the shortest of all the courses we've seen so far, with a par 4 that is definitely going to be gettable. You saw Brooks hitting like I think 330-yard drive. Obviously bounces, get some more on it. He drove that par 4, but you have a 6,800-yard course at TPC Riverdale Highlands at the Travelers 2020 is what we're going to be attempting this week. But just last week to kind of close the door on it, yeah, I mean, we had Hatton at one point. He was the leader in the clubhouse at 17 under for 60-1 odds bets on him. At some points we had Brooks there as well. Big players that were in a lot of our lineups. Even Dustin Johnson, who finished T17, was fine at the price point. We said, look, Dustin Johnson and Brooks, if these guys are going to be in the mid to low 8K range, 8,500, 8,400, 8,600, right around that price point, they just need to get you a top 20. They both did. Brooks finished fantastic as well. And now you're in a position where a lot of the lineups are just absolutely crushing. Last week, Max Homa gets it done for us. Just missed the cut on the number 2 weeks ago, but he's playing fantastic. Last week just gets another good weekend. So we had a very good week last week after following up a very good week the first week. The two best 2-week run of my so far 2020 season when it comes to the DFS side, but the outright marker were there as well. Morikawa just breaking our hearts last week, but we're back here again, feeling really good. These short courses are lining up very similar, so it's a very interesting way to start off the break because the guys up top are not having this insane advantage because these aren't 7,300-yard courses, 7,400-yard courses. This one's going to be a little over 6,800 yards, which means that doesn't mean they're at an extreme disadvantage for their skill sets by any means. They're still elite players. You still see Rory up top. You still see Bryson up top. You still see John Rahm competing, Justin Thomas, all these guys. Rory hasn't been able to put together 4 days of solid golf, but you still see the elite guys up there. It's just now that everybody has a chance to actually go out and win this thing. Ches Reavie last year ended up winning at 17 under here. So I'm excited about last week. Hopefully you got a piece of that. If you're brand new here, be sure to hit the like button. And if you're not brand new, but you watched last week and you like what you saw or the last couple of weeks from golf or all my NFL videos, please do. Be sure that you're subscribed to the channel. Bottom right-hand corner, big old subscribe button pops up on the screen. Take your second of your time to do that. On the podcast version, I do a $50 giveaway weekly, and only like 3 people do it. So that is for if you hit the subscribe button on the podcast and leave a podcast review on Apple iTunes. You do not have to have an iTunes account to be able to do that. You can do it as a guest as well. So be sure to do all that stuff, link down below. But the big one, subscribing on YouTube helps this channel grow a ton. I will call out that I do have Patreon exclusive content as well. And last week was fantastic. The Closing Thoughts podcast on Wednesday, it seemed like every single thing that we were putting out there was hitting, and in a major way, from just bets to the DFS plays. $7,000, $6,000 range hits were fantastic. Homa was one of them this week at $7,000 flat, or last week, and he's again $7,000 for some odd reason. But you can go ahead and check that out. I have projections, rankings, these models on there, so all those things are already done. We just had a guy win $100,000 reaching out on Discord. We had a couple of guys winning $20,000 on outright betting tickets. We had guys winning $4,000, $5,000, $3,000. So it was a very good week for the community in general on Patreon. And that's just the start of the good week on Patreon. There's probably at least another 15 or 20 people that reached out, turning $5 into $85, turning $25 into $700, right? Things like that. So last week was like a great week for Patreon members. Be sure to check it out. Linked down below. Go ahead, get in there. What are you waiting for? You're missing out on a ton of quality information. So let's get into this course specifically, and then we'll get into some of the picks in each of the price ranges. As you can see, the 8K and above range is on the screen behind me right now if you're watching on YouTube. So the course itself, as I kind of hinted at earlier and really said, TPC Riverdale Highlands is going to be the Travelers 2020 course, which it usually is. It's a Pete Dye design. It's 6,841 yards. So if you're not familiar with golf and you're still just kind of getting your feet wet and you're starting to enjoy it based on the first 2 weeks that you got of just fantastic golf and crowded leaderboards, well, there was like 40 guys in contention on Sunday at the start of the day, if not more. Well, you're going to be getting an even shorter course this week. Usually if you're finding these par 70s, if you see the number say par 70, usually means a short course. You're looking at par 71s, par 72s for the most part. So a very short course here with now POA greens. I believe they converted from bent grass greens back in the day. So that'll affect some golfers' play. Something major, but it will affect some golfers. And then hole 6 here has played the easiest on the course over the past few years. It is a par 5, 591 yards. Then you also have another easy par 5. Hole 13 is the second easiest course here at 534 yards. And hole 15 is then the third easiest for the par 4 at 289 yards. And that's one I want to discuss that one because it's only 289 yards for a par 4. So usually your par 4s are going to be even the shorter ones in the low 300s, maybe 315, 320. 289 yards is a gettable par 4. We've seen players drive this, Dustin Johnson in the past. Players, just Bryson has been here a ton. Just drive that par 4, and you're going to see it a lot more. So the eagle opportunities will be there on that par 4, and it should be a very easy hole to pick up some birdies on. It's a very short hole, hole 15, the par 4. Talking about the field here, the defending champ Chez Reavie is here. He won at minus 17 under last year, and this is a Bubba Watson course. I mean, he has a couple of these on tour. He won in 2018 at 17 under as well. He won in 2015, 2010. So you're looking at Bubba having a lot of success. Peak Jordan Spieth towards the end of his peakness in 2017, won at 12 under. You have 33 of the top 40 golfers in the world at this course, and some big golfers are making their debuts. Last week, you had Hatton and Matsuyama Hideki come out and make theirs post-COVID. This week, you're going to have a couple more big names in Patrick Cantlay and a man named Paul Casey. So these guys, it'll be interesting. You had last week Hatton just ball out. It didn't matter for the break with him, but Hideki struggled. If you're talking about the betting markets, Hideki had a shorter number, so maybe not take the risk on that, whereas Hatton was still 60 to 1. So both of these guys have kind of short numbers. If you're looking at guys like Paul Casey, 33. If you're looking at guys like Cantlay, 22. So it's really hard to trust these guys coming right out of the break, but also Cantlay's a top 10 golfer in the world. Casey's top 25. So it's an interesting thing to see. I guess if you're going to do it, I would take the longer odds player in Paul Casey at 33 to 1, but even that's not long odds. So in the betting market, I probably avoid these guys coming back, even though I did have Hatton last week. It was just such a long enough number, and the guy was cooking like 2 wins in his past 3 or 4 starts. So that's kind of the way that I look at it. But in DFS, they're going to be in play for me. Just looking at key stats here before we get into the ranges. So the key stats are similar to what we've seen the last few weeks if you've been tuning in. Ball striking and approach play are going to matter, but do not be fooled. And I have this in my notes. Also, another thing on Patreon is just I take about a page of notes for the course, the field, all this stuff I'm pretty much saying now, key stats. I'll add anything out throughout the week, but don't be fooled and say that, okay, it's going to be a shorter course, so the bombers don't matter here. No. When the bombers are elite bombers, and right now the elite bombers are your guys like Bryson, Rory, John Rahm, right? When it's these guys, Dustin Johnson, are in the field, Brooks, when all these guys are in the field, they're not going to automatically just they're not going to suck, right? They're not going to go off the tee and not matter. It just means that now everybody else is sort of on a more balanced playing field. So when these guys probably have a wider gap between the rest of the field in their chances of winning, or at least based on the odds, right? You have Rory coming in instead of being normally 7 to 1, and like Bryson or Justin Thomas being like 8 or 9 to 1 as a second favorite. You're having them start at 12 and 14 because it's just more of a fair playing field when you don't need to win based off your off the tee game, and your tee to green doesn't have to rely on your off the tee and your driver as much. But when I'm going to say ball striking short game, right? Your approach is a big one here that are going to matter. It does prop up the players that have that skill set even more, and a lot of those elite guys have that skill set. So guys like Bryson have great irons and approach play. Guys like Rory has great irons, right? All these guys up top are going to have that. Webb Simpson. So you don't have to just automatically dock them down. You just have to know now that everybody's on a more balanced playing field. And we've been lucky with these 3 in a row. It's not normally like this on tour. Normally you're going to get a bomber course. You're going to get a short course. It's going to be all mixed around. We've had 3 in a row now of the short courses where guys with their irons, their approach play, their ball striking are on a more level playing field, if not have that skill enhanced now. Driving accuracy will matter a little bit more here than in other places on tour. I think it's a 6% difference, or approximately a 6%. Scrambling is not more important here by any means. Greens and regulation is about tour average here in terms of how important it is. In the last 2 years, the cut line has been -1. If you're interested, last 3 out of the 4 years, so on Friday when your players get cut or not, it has been -1 the last 3 out of 4 years and the last 2 years. So we started off in the 10,000 plus range, which for back-to-back weeks, we now have 6 players at 10,000 plus, which again, it's normally 5 golfers above 10,000. Now it's 6 golfers, so it's a lot of familiar names. You have Brooks Koepka going from the mid to low 8K range to the 10K range after one good showing, and he did look good, and he has played here 3 of the last 4 years. You have a guy in Rory Mcilroy who we're normally seeing an automatic 20% ownership guy, right? Let's look back at Rory's numbers. The Genesis, 16% on, 26% on at the WGC, smaller field event, 41.8% on at the Arnold Palmer, 15% at the Charles Schwab, and then last week just 12.5%. Now his price is coming down, but his play is making him not want to be taken here after his first time in over a year back-to-back weeks of not finishing top 10 or better. And overall, if you're looking at the 4 rounds, it's not bad golf. And again, he's making the cuts. He's finishing 32nd, 41st, but he's just having 1 or 2 bad days. At the Charles Schwab, it was 1 bad day. Last week, it was 2 bad days. So you're looking at him finishing with gaining everywhere outside of putting. He ends up losing 0.9 strokes putting, but he just can't put together 4 solid rounds of golf. Somewhere he's blowing up. 2 weeks ago, it was on Sunday. This past week was on multiple days, Saturday being a big one. So you have Rory at 12 to 1 in the betting market. He's starting to get to that number where he's like an auto bet if he gets like 16 or 18 to 1, in my opinion. But right now, again, if you've been following my content, these are loaded fields. I don't need to get Rory versus the entire field. I don't need to get Bryson versus the entire field, whether it's DraftKings or a betting market right now. So although I do think they're both attractive to get into your lineups, I have X's by them, and I'll have my full interest on Wednesday's closing thoughts with my ownership and where I think ownership's coming in, where you shouldn't be. So again, get the Patreon link down below, banner on the screen. Hit the subscribe subscribe button, all this stuff popping up right now. But for me, I'm probably going to be starting my lineups in the 10K plus range at a man named Jon Rahm, who I bet on last week at 18 to 1. Who I have another bet on this week at 20 to 1, where I saw it open. This number is just way too low. You can probably find it maybe even 22 to 1 in some spots. But last week he comes in with 11% ownership. He's going to come in with even less ownership now that Brooks had a good week and people, all the casuals playing the Millie Maker and everything. No Brooks Koepka from winning majors. You have Webb Simpson, who just won last week, right above him. So Jon Rahm's in the sandwich space where I think a lot of people who are casuals still don't know who Jon Rahm is, or at least don't know him relative to Bryson's social media hype, Rory, Brooks, right? Even guys like Dustin Johnson. So you're going to get good numbers on Jon Rahm, and that's what we're getting in the betting market, but you're also getting that in DraftKings. Jon Rahm's $10,200. Jon Rahm is consistently in not as loaded fields, and when he's on top of his game, which again, I mean, a 33rd and a miscut after the miscut really knocked down his ownership. Now he finishes 33rd, although again, one bad day of golf. I do think that Jon Rahm at 10,200 is right there for you. So if you're looking at the 10K plus range, he stands out the most for you. Now Brooks did get back into the swing of things. I had a bet on Brooks each of the last 2 weeks. I did like Brooks last week in DraftKings. We had a good amount of him, and I think everybody did based on the price point, or at least everybody should have, but he only comes in 10% owned, which is pretty shocking to me. I don't think he'll be that popular based on the price point now that he's spiked up. The man was just balling. He had 6 strokes gained tee to green, 6.9 strokes off the tee. His around the green play was pretty good. He gained 3.8 with his putter, so everything was really clicking. The big thing for him was just the off the tee game was clicking. Again, that doesn't matter as much here, but if you can do it very good, it will still benefit for you. So Jon Rahm's the guy who stands out. Again, Webb won last week. He was bad the week before, missing the cut, historically bad. He's on a hot streak right now, so if you want to keep riding it, that's fine. The price point does spike upwards now from being at 9K flat to 10,500, so it's not the exact same golfer, although it is. It's not the exact same DraftKings pricing golfer, but you see a $1,500 price spot. We bought the dip last week. We got him at $9,000 in a lot of our lineups, the highest owned golfer for myself. He was my highest rated golfer if you have Patreon rankings and all that stuff when it comes to cash and also GPPs. When it comes to your overall value rating, he was my best value rating based on price point last week. But for this week, I'm probably going to get away from him. I don't like really building too much in the 10K plus range personally, at least in these loaded fields. So Jon Rahm is where I would start with and then skedaddle out of there. If I'm not playing one guy, I usually don't get to a lot of Justin Thomas just because I prefer Bryson and Rory, who are not that much more expensive, rather than just save 600 and get down to Jon Rahm. So I doubt I have a lot of Justin Thomas. I probably won't have a lot of Webb Simpson. I don't think I have a ton of Brooks. So Rahm, Bryson, and Rory are the ones that I would get here, but really just Rahm if I'm being honest with you and starting off some lineups there. So now let's get to the 9K range. In the 9K range, we get one Patrick Cantlay back, and Patrick Cantlay is the definition of a guy who's just usually a chalk bunny. Now, I think after he's coming back, again, a lot of casuals probably don't know Patrick Cantlay. When I say casuals, I mean players that have never played DFS golf before until the last couple of weeks, and you might say they don't know anybody, but they've definitely heard of Rory, obviously Tiger Woods. They've heard of some of these names, maybe even Dustin Johnson, Ricky Fowler, Jason Day, those types of names, right? Phil Mickelson. But even if they're casual and they watch golf just for the majors, they probably don't know these names as much because, well, the PGA Tour just does a terrible job highlighting these guys and marketing them for the future of when Tiger and Phil are not actually out there. But that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But Patrick Cantlay usually picks up a ton of ownership. I don't think it will be the case now since he's just coming back from a break where you saw guys like Hatton and Hideki not pick up a ton of ownership. But before the break, 19%, 24%, 25%, 21%. That was his ownership numbers. Those ownership numbers, if you're not familiar, are usually like the top 1 or 2 ownership numbers, right up there with Rory, right up there with guys like Xander and Morikawa that usually pick up ownership on every single event. So you'll get Cantlay at a lower number. I just don't want to be playing him in this loaded of a field at a high clip. I love playing Patrick Cantlay, and as you can see, everybody else normally does. Patrick Cantlay was pretty consistent. He's very similar to Xander this year, and maybe he had one bad round or one piece of his game was not clicking, but for the most part, very, very consistent golfer. And this is where his finishes have been pretty much this year. He hasn't played a ton, a 4th at the Tour Champions. He had to do a little bit of surgery with his nose or something. I don't really remember. 11th at the AT&T and a 17th at the Genesis. Those are strong numbers. Now he's $9,800, which is a price point that is a little bit hard to get to. I'd rather get to Rahm for $400 more. I'd rather get to a ton of guys below him in this 9K range and even in the 8K range. So although Patrick Cantlay, it has not played and we haven't seen a lot from him, I do have interest. There's just so many guys right there with Xander, Dustin Johnson that we're about to talk about that I do like them a little bit more, but I will have a couple of shares of Cantlay, just nothing major, probably not in any of my high stakes lineups right now. My first yes in the 9K range, if you can't see the screen and you're listening on the podcast, is Dustin Johnson. And Dustin Johnson last week, again, just like Brooks, even though they were very cheap, not coming in with a lot of ownership, and I don't think they'll be insanely owned because of the range that they're in this week, surrounded by guys like Justin Rose, Xander, Cantlay, Morikawa. You saw at the RBC at T17 last week, he gained 7 strokes tee to green. The putter, the around the green play, the short game was still struggling for him, something that has been his issue for a while now. Now, it wasn't massively, like he wasn't losing a stroke and a half to 6 strokes like he lost at the WGC, but he is only gaining right now in like 2 out of his last 12 contests. He hasn't gained since the Genesis in February. Before that, he hasn't gained since the Tour Champions, his first event back January 5th. So the putter's a concern here, and short game will matter. But something else that does also matter here is approach play. That's been fine, and he's coming off of gaining 3 strokes on approach, gaining more than 4 strokes tee to green in the last 3 out of 4 contests, and nothing major lost to Charles Schwab. I think DJ's clicking a little bit here. I'm going to have right now a bet on him around 30 to 1 is where I saw the number where I got it at. So Rahm and DJ are my bets so far. I do like Dustin Johnson at 9,400. It's nothing insane though. Like his price point comes up about $1,000. And although we saw some positives from him last week, I don't think we saw enough out of him in the putting department. I don't think we saw enough out of him overall turning his game around. And the fact that this is not going to reward bombers as much of a course, although he will be fine here, it's going to reward other people more. So it closes that gap. Like I said earlier, he's not a guy, although I have a yes that next to him, that's okay, automatic 25% own guy. No. I just like him here in general at this price tag because just like Brooks is $10,000, you can tell me that DJ would have opened up at $10,000 this week, and I said, okay, so I think you're getting a slight discount. And this is how you know it's a crowded field, and this is how you know there's casuals playing, because nobody knows who Colin Morikawa is if you're not dug into the PGA Tour, because he's a younger player, just like all the other younger players on tour, Sungjae Im. People know these guys. If you're familiar with golf, and you're probably sitting there saying, how don't they know him? No, there's a ton of guys coming in that don't know him right now, and he's been fantastic, and just when he lost in the playoffs to Charles Schwab, he's having a very similar course this week, a shorter course, which will reward his ball striking numbers even better, his second shot, his approach play, all that stuff, and now you're getting him at the exact same price he was 2 weeks ago to Charles Schwab, $9,100. I love it. Give me all of it right now. I have a bet on him right now at 33 to 1 where it opened. I'm going to have a lot of him in DraftKings. I would assume so at least. Go get me some Colin Morikawa. Now, Morikawa last week just blew up over the weekend. I mean, he lost on the short game alone, 4 strokes around the green and putting combined. He ended up just stinking total, 3.2 strokes lost total. He made the cut, but he finished 64th, pretty much dead fucking last after the cut. But he finishes second at the Charles Schwab, 9th at the Arnold Palmer. So last week, I'm happy he finished that bad because I'm not too worried about that coming into this week. It is a short course. What is going to matter here? Ball striking, short game, and your approach play the most. That's going to prop up your game the most here. He is likely the best ball striker, honestly, in the world right now. Like, there's a really good chance it's the best ball striker in the world that we're talking about at $9,100. He is definitely one of the best tee to green players in the world, 6th overall, and you're getting him for $9,100. He's sandwiching out around guys like Answer, who has been very good. Answer has been good this year. He's like top 12 overall in DK scoring and overall total strokes gained, but he's a situation where he just bombed out last week, balled out. He hit every single greens in regulation on Sunday and still didn't win the event. So you peaked. Like last week, I think Answer peaked. I think he's been doing fantastic. I think he could obviously win this week, but I don't want to chase the guy who just had like a historical performance, and now people at a higher price point are going to think that he's going to do it again. And then you look back at Daniel Berger, who's been competing everywhere, right? A win, and then last week almost wins the damn thing again after chipping in. I think it was on 17. You're like, is he going to birdie 18 now and be right there in contention? But now you're in a situation that he's priced up Answer just like Berger was. Berger went from like 77 to 8,900 from the past 2 weeks. Answer goes from that type of a range to now $9,000 flat. I'm personally not going to have any Answer. I know that he did really well. I know that a lot of people like Answer. I know that people had huge outright tickets on him. I'm happy he didn't win based on my pockets and my Webb Simpson tickets. But for me personally, I'm spending an extra $100 and getting up to Morikawa, an extra $400 getting to DJ. I didn't really touch on Xander or Justin Rose. I think they're both fine. I probably don't get too much Justin Rose, although he's been playing fine. I probably get to more Xander. So this range, I like Morikawa the most, DJ, and then Xander and Cantley is probably where I go. I probably don't get to any Answer, and I might not get to any Rose as of right now unless his ownership is just so much lower. So now getting into the 8K range we go. Now in this range on my end, you'll see a lot of X's by players. Those means that I have interest. Like, I'm not going to fade this entire range. Of course, this is a very good range. The 8K range is usually where you find a lot of guys pop off. Last week you had Brooks, you had Hatton, you had DJ. The 8K range is loaded. These golfers are very similar in terms of skill set as the guys up top. Those guys are the mega elites, in my opinion, your Rorys, your Brysons, JTs, your Rahms, but they're very similar when it comes to this course, propping up their skill sets. So a guy I normally love to play is Paul Casey. When you talk about how he fits this course, it is so well. He plays here almost every year. He's finished T5 or better in 4 out of the last 5 years in 3 straight years. The course was never this loaded though, so you can't really take course history too much into account. The only reason that I'm not playing Paul Casey with a yes by his name is because there has been a layoff, and again, it's not the greatest of a price point for a guy who's coming off a layoff. If he was $8,000 flat like Hatton last week, it's easier to take that risk on him because he doesn't have to prop you up. Hatton at $8,000, he finishes T25 or better, he's balling out for me. When Casey's 8,900, I need that T20. I borderline need that T15 out of you, and it makes it a little bit harder to trust your skill set when I don't know if you're rusty. But before the break, top 5 player in many departments of approach play, of tee to green play, overall strokes gained, top 20 type of a player. So Casey, somebody that I usually play in this price range, I'll have some of, but I can't be as confident at the price point since we haven't seen him in almost 4 months now. This is the Bubba Watson track. I think everybody knows that now. He won 3 out of the last like 5 or 6 years. Well, 3 times since 2010 here. He's won twice in the last 5 years. He's made the cut 4 out of the last 5 years. I'm not going to get to as much Bubba. I do think that if you want to bet him, it's fine. He's going to come in at a nice number around 30 to 1 in some spots. I see it mainly at 28 to 1 right now. I don't have a bet on him yet. I know the course history is going to be good here. here, but very, very similar to the talks on Paul Casey and the other courses in the past. Course history for me here, although they'll like it, these guys should do good here. They should make the cut. They should contend at least or have a better chance to. It's a loaded field. They're not now the top 5 golfer in the field, the Paul Caseys and the Bubba Watsons. They're going to come in as borderline outside the top 15 golfers in this field when it comes to skill set. That just makes it that much harder to win. On Sunday, when you see these crowded leaderboards from the past week, who are the guys that rose to the top the past 2 weeks? The very good golfers, the top 20 golfers in the world, or at least at that point, Berger was pushing and now is right around the top 20. So now you're in situations where you have to just beat out not just scrubs who don't have the mental state on a Sunday, you have to beat out the guys who have been there, have won major champions, multiple of them, and now that's what you're competing with, which Bubba has as well, but it's just a lot tougher to pull off a victory. So I'm not going to get to Bubba in really any formats too much. He's fine at $8,800 to get to in DraftKings, but it's the same thing. I'd rather get up to Morikawa or down to this next range. Patrick Reed is somebody that I warned a lot of people about last week on the Patreon show, and I'm going to have an X by him, but I'm going to warn about it again. If Patrick Reed, he's very similar to Jordan Spieth right now. He's nowhere near as bad as Jordan Spieth in these departments, but if his putter is not getting electrically hot for him, he wins a month before break. He picks up 11 strokes with the putter. He finishes pretty well 2 weeks ago. He picks up like 7 strokes with the putter. And now last week he ends up losing strokes with the putter and it doesn't do well for him. And he ends up finishing in a very bad spot for you at his price point. So if Patrick Reed's putter is on, you're probably looking at a top 20, top 15 pushing in contention on Sunday. If it's not on, you're looking at this guy's likely going to miss the cut or he's not going to finish all that well outside maybe the top 30. So for Reed at 8,700, I think it's a risky price based on these next like 2 out of 3 guys that I'm looking at. So Sanjay has a bad week and his price drops $1,000. Sanjay, I don't even remember the last time that he missed back-to-back missed cuts. Let's see the last time Sanjay went back-to-back missed cuts, if ever. Okay, you want to see here? Back-to-back missed cuts, PGA Championship and Charles Schwab last year. He ends up going in May of 2019, so it's been over a year since he missed back-to-back missed cuts. I believe it was Rick from Rick Run Good that said that the only time he's missed or his 2 worst putting performances were here at the RBC Heritage, so maybe it's just something going on there with the greens a little bit. He ends up losing 4.4 strokes lost putting, and if I filter just by strokes putting, the last time 3.7 strokes putting loss was at the RBC, so not a spot that he seems to like all that much. So I'm going to go right back to Sanjay here for a guy who's just been steaming hot before this missed cut, and maybe it makes people jump off of him, even though you can buy the dip now with the price point coming down. He finished first at the Honda, third at the Arnold Palmer, 10th at the Charles Schwab before this finish. I'm fine going to Sanjay where he's now cheaper. At 8,600, he's in that Dustin Brooks range from last week. You get me a top 20 or even a top 25, you're completely fine. That's all you got to do for me. But we damn well know sure that Sanjay on a Sunday can be right there at the top 10, at the top 5 in contention, but all we need is a top 20 or 25 of him. Yeah, he could be a staple. He could be a starting point for a lot of your lineups. Next up will be Gary Woodland, a guy who has the Rory Mcilroy syndrome right now, and he has this for probably the 3rd time this year, just on Sundays and really on Saturday for this past week for Woodland, just blowing up. I think he had a quad. I think he shot like, and it was either on Saturday or Sunday. I think it was Sunday maybe. He had like an 8. He put up an 8. Last week on Sunday, he puts up a 7. He puts up a triple bogey. 2 weeks ago, this past week, he puts up a quad bogey. So not great. Not a good way to stay in contention on the weekend. But he's still playing fine, and he's still having his price drop, if anything. Gary Woodland, 8,300, who was extremely popular, one of the most popular behind Webb Simpson, 28% last week. Maybe now, after not really being in contention on Sunday, does good for people. But he's not burning anybody, so I think he's still going to pick up ownership. But this is what Gary Woodland did. He finished 62nd overall because, well, he lost 4.2 strokes tee to green, 4.8 strokes off the tee, and a lot of that came in one really, really bad round. And the weekend in general, he just couldn't put it together. Hasn't played here in 3 years, finished T38 4 years ago, T25 years ago at this event. But he's still in a situation where he had 1 or 2 bad rounds, and he's still really good every other time of the year. So $8,300, I'm liking Gary Woodland yet again, just because of the price point that you can get him at. So Sanjay and Gary Woodland in this range stand out. I think that Patrick Reed, Bubba Watson, Paul Casey, they're all fine. I'm probably not going to have a ton of Reed, a ton of Watson, probably get to a little bit more Paul Casey. But then another guy down here that I really do like, and he's a borderline yes for me based on the price point, is a man that usually picks up ownership, but again, casuals probably don't know him as much. Tony Finau, because he was only 12% on last week, 20% on the Charles Schwab, but just $8,200 for Tony Finau. Finau has played these last 2 events, although he hasn't really been there on the weekend, so nobody's hyping him up as much. 23rd at the Charles Schwab, 33rd at the RBC. Again, those are fine points. If you're $8,200 and you finish 23rd for me at this event, you're going to do very well for me. And we know Tony Finau can be in contention. Tony Finau's off the tee game has been fine. His tee to green game is one of the best in the entire field. You're looking at a guy in Tony Finau whose short game is going to be his major problem here, but number 4 in tee to green and overall strokes gained this year. So I do like him at $8,200. So in this range, I probably rank it Sanjay, Woodland, and Finau as my top 3 guys in the 8K range, and I feel very good about all of them. I have outright bets on none of them right now, but I might go back to Sanjay at a 35-1 number. To the 7K range we go, and before we do, take a second of your time. Hit that like button right now on the YouTube channel and smash the big old subscribe button that pops up on the screen. That is the best way to help this channel grow. If you support what I'm doing, if you enjoy what I'm doing, if you hit the subscribe button within the channel, even if you don't subscribe to any channels, just do it for mine. Why not? This is beneficial information information to you. And if you want even more of it, Wednesday's Closing Thoughts podcast is going to be on Patreon. My projections and rankings for all golfers. 2 weeks ago, our highest ranked golfer and our best ranked golfer was Collin Morikawa. Loses in the playoffs. I'm sorry, only finished second for us. Last week, the highest ranked golfers were John Rahm, Webb Simpson, and Hatton. So 2 guys who finished top 3. Webb Simpson, who obviously wins the whole event. We're scorching hot right now, so check that out. When I say we, I mean me. So if you want to support me, down below. Let's get into the 7K range. I got 3 names for you that stand out. Although there's a ton of guys you can see in yellow in this column right here, the YES column in yellow. A lot of guys that I do like, I think are fine. Neiman coming off of a big week and a big round the other day, shooting like 8 under, insane. A T5 here last year, but I'm going to start off with Viktor Hovland, guy who does not pick up a ton of ownership either right now. A guy who's at a price point where a lot of other guys are, right? Ian Poulter at his exact same price point. A lot of guys getting on JT Poston and Neiman as of late. Corey Connors has been playing well, so I don't think Hovland picks up a ton of overall ownership. The short game, if anything, will be your biggest concern with a guy like Viktor Hovland if you're looking at around the green play, one of the worst in the field. But he is, when I talk about Collin Morikawa being probably as of right now the best ball striker on tour, he is Viktor Hovland, ranked number 1 on tour right now. He's number 2 off the tee. He's top 10 in tee to green, top 10 in approach. This is a very good golfer for this very specific course at 7,800. I have an outright bet right now on Viktor Hovland at 60-1. He is the 3rd guy that I have bet on so far this week. I believe I had bets on DJ and John Rahm, and now Viktor Hovland at 60-1. I'll probably make a couple more bets before finishing this up. But if you're looking at Hovland, tee to green game, off the tee, approach game, all those things have been fine. The main issues are around the green and putting, which are the issue for really a lot of players. But if you get a week where he just is okay in that department, and like 2 weeks ago at the Charles Schwab where he finishes 23rd, last week where he finishes 21st, he's losing no strokes. 0 strokes lost putting at the Charles Schwab, 0.3 strokes lost putting at the RBC. That's fine. Lose 0.3 strokes, I'll be fine. You'll probably finish top 20. You'll get us a good spot or even top 30. So Hovland's one guy that I like, and I'm just going to like the young guys a lot. Scotty Scheffler is somebody that I like a lot. Got him at 80-1 in the betting market. This is a guy who's a top 10 fantasy scorer when it comes to DraftKings. He's ranked 13th overall in strokes gained total. He's a fine around the green type of a player relative to some of the other guys around here and that I like. Top 10 ball striker, top 15 tee to green. These young players, Hovland and Scotty Scheffler, I like a lot this week. They're good approach players. They're good with their irons. They're good when it comes to picking up birdies for DraftKings scoring, and they're probably not going to pick up a ton of ownership. Maybe they see 15%. I say they're going to be closer to 10 to 12%. Scotty was doing very well before the break at T15 at Arnold Palmer, very tough course. We saw him at the Amex, of course, finishing 3rd where he had an overnight lead, slept on that lead. So Scotty at 80-1, somebody that I like a lot here in this range. Between Hovland and Scotty, because of the price point being a little bit cheaper, and Scotty just picking up a ton of eagles and birdie opportunities, I'd probably go to Scotty Scheffler over Hovland here, but I'm fine getting them both in your lineup. Like if you want to get both Scotty Scheffler and Hovland in your lineup, that's a lot of upside in my opinion, even if they don't place high. Like if they place like 15th and 20th overall, based on the fact that they just drop down birdies and drop down some eagles as well in a lot of contests, they're going to be in a situation where they can be in the optimal lineup, both of them at that point. And then if you've been watching and listening to this show this week, you're going to probably already know that Max Homa is somebody that I want to get. I played Max Homa. I've been playing him every single week pretty much since he started popping off. I believe I got on Max Homa when he finished 9th at the Farmers, was the first week that I rostered him, and I wrote it out. He then finished 6th, 14th, 5th, 24th. So I was like, I'm going to keep playing the guy who continues to be wildly underpriced. He misses the cut at the Charles Schwab at a $7,500 price tag. He misses the cut on the number after playing very good golf. He doesn't blow up anywhere. He actually gained strokes off the tee, gained strokes tee to green, and overall was gaining strokes. He just didn't play fantastic, right? He played good golf, and guys around him were just playing really good the first 2 days of the Charles Schwab and going low. Well, he plays some better golf, and at one point he was like tied for 7th. He finishes 41st overall, but at $7,000, that's all you need to do for me. His approach play picked up. That's the thing that was really popping off and why he started to go on this run. He was gaining strokes in approach 5 straight events before, not gaining strokes and missing the cut to Charles Schwab, lost 0.4. And last week, his approach game, his irons got hot again, 6.2 strokes gained. His tee to green was hot. And again, this is another course where that's going to matter. He's $7,000. The price point does not move, even though heading into the weekend, he was like a top 10 player overall last week, and he played fine heading into the weekend as well with the T41 finish. So Homa, another guy at $7,000 flat that I'm going to get to. There's a ton of guys in here if you want to talk about Billy Ho, if you want to talk about Ryan Palmer, Benny Ann, Corey Connors, all these guys you can go in there and get. Connors is a guy that at 7,500 does scare me for this type of a course. It's so short that if he's not hitting with his irons, which he's very good with his irons, but if he's not hitting the green, it's going to be a downfall in his DraftKings scoring for sure. To be honest with you, between 6,900 and 6,500 range now on the screen, there's nobody that stands out. There's nobody that's a yes as of right now for me. Like I like guys, you can see a bunch of X's, but the 7K range, there's guys that stand out a lot. And then obviously that 8 and 9K range is a lot as well. But this range, not a ton. And like I said last week, I'm really not hovering into the 6K range all that much. And I don't expect to this week as well. You have Carlos Ortiz here, who finished 33rd, was playing very, very well. At one point, he was 14 under and very close to the lead. He's going to be in this range. He's going to be at a decent price point for you of 6,800, although that price point does come up. He's one of the best in this range. If not, I believe he is the best DraftKings scorer in the overall range. But it's a situation where you're paying 6,800 for him. I'd rather have Homa, who I think has a little bit more consistency and more cut equity. But that being being said, in 4 of his last 5 events, he's finished 33rd or better. And then in 3 of those 4 events, he's finished 26th or better. So he does have upside, Carlos Ortiz, in scoring. I think a lot of people know that at this point. So he stands out. You have the first round leader, a guy who's continuing to play better as he goes on. In Matthew Naismith, his scoring average continues to go down. These guys won't be owned, so ownership really doesn't come into effect all that much here. But he played well. He's gained on approach in a ton of straight contests. I mean, if you're looking at it, his past 5 contests, he's gained on approach. He's only lost 0.1 before that. So if you take out that event, he's gained on approach in his last 8 contests because that was pretty much a neutral split. And approach play is what matters here. His tee to green play has been fine as well. So yeah, Matthew Naismith, another name after being a first round leader. He's probably not going to be owned. He's 6,600. He stands out a good amount here. So like Ortiz, I probably like Naismith a little bit more for the skill set matchup at this course. And then the last guy I'll at least point to is Vaughn Taylor. He doesn't set up that well here, but I think he at least has a skill set at 6,500 to produce something for you. And then if you want to go lower into the ranges, if I go to the 6.4K to 6K range, there's not a lot that I like down here. Like Sepp Strop is down here. Tommy Hogue at 6,400 is interesting. Griot, if you want to continue to have a heart attack at this point, is 6,300. And I go down a little bit more. Lanto at 6,300. Lanto has been terrible, although he did shoot better on Friday, I believe, but he still missed a cut. He went 4 under on Friday after going 5 over. He was in one of my high stakes lineups, I think I put in Discord, and he didn't actually ruin that lineup. That lineup still won $1,250 because it had Hatton, it had Brooks, and it had Webb in it. So it was a 333 buy, and it still won $1,250, even with Lanto having a 5 out of 6 making the cut. So Lanto, although you didn't ruin me, you definitely held me down from doing some much better things last week. I.e. just going to Carlos Ortiz or something like that. Lanto, another guy down here. Cameron Trungale is going to be here. Cameron Trungale's approach play has been very good. Cameron Trungale in general has been very good as of late. So I do think that at 6,300, if I was to put a yes by one of these players' names, it would be Cameron Trungale at 6,300, and then probably Tom Hogue at 6,400. If you want to get real crazy and just go all the way down to the bottom here, the 6K range, there is a man. Xingzu Zhang is down here. I would probably not play him in DraftKings, but if you want to outright bet him at 600 to 1, go for it. He does have some skills that line up here relative to the other players in this range, at least if you're looking for just a quality bet. 600 to 1 I actually think is good value, but if you're looking at EV, like the expected value of that actually paying off for you, him winning in 600 events, yeah, I think it probably happens. So I think that it's a decent bet to at least look at. You want to throw $3 on that, you got an $1,800 winner if anything goes crazy. So that's just below range. Again, these guys don't pick up a ton of ownership. They are going to be factors, but they're not going to be major factors in my lineup. So that was a little bit of a longer video, but I appreciate you all tuning into this one. And please do hit the like button before you go and the big old subscribe button that popped up. Check out Patreon. I will be live tomorrow on YouTube, but also the Patreon exclusive podcast where I talk about my plays, where I'm going. Last 2 weeks have been very, very good for us in both the betting markets and outright. A ton of people reached out for DraftKings. Somebody won $100,000 when they were Patreon, so be sure to check out Patreon, linked down below as well. Hit all those things. You check out my draft guide for the NFL season has launched on my website, linked down below as well. It's a limited time offer for just $10 down below, so you can check that out. That's only going to be a summer offer. So I appreciate y'all tuning in. My name's Sal. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.